All right. So I started off saying yesterday that the Rebbe Rashab gave a talk which the Rebbe said was prophetic. I didn't say why it was prophetic. The Rebbe Rashab mentions in this talk called Yitzchak Chometz Beis David, all who go out to war from the house of David, the house of King David, they write a bill of divorce to their wives. And we learned yesterday that the reason they write the bill of divorce is because they're not sure if they're going to come back from battle or not. They don't want to leave their wives as an aguna. And we learned yesterday that the meaning of the house of David versus David himself refers to a time where Mashiach hasn't yet been revealed. Just like when the Gemara uses the expression, the son of David, it means that there isn't yet David himself. It's not yet the full revelation of Mashiach. There is a war that's being fought because Mashiach hasn't yet come. And the Rebbe Rashab describes in this talk two kinds of people. The reason why it's called prophetic is because Rebbe said no one would have imagined, when Rebbe Rashab said this talk, that there would be the kind of person that he describes. The second category. The first category was what was happening at the time. The Yitzhak was closing down mikvahs and shuls left and right throughout the Soviet Union. And they were Jews who were warring against Hashem. They were against Jewish children studying Torah. They were against people believing in God. It was a war against God. That's what the first half of the verse means at the end of chapter 89 and Tehillim that we discussed yesterday. Your enemies, O God. Your enemies, O God, refers to the generation of the Yitzhak. That's what Rebbe Rashab says. What was prophetic, the Rebbe said, was that the Rebbe Rashab describes another kind of person who keeps Torah and keeps mitzvahs, but his belief in Mashiach is lacking. And the Rebbe said there wouldn't have been, no one would have expected when Rebbe Rashab said this, there could be such a person. Because by Yidden, it's such a strong and powerful and fundamental idea that this is something that you'd expect everyone to have. They believe in Torah, they believe in mitzvahs. Of course they believe in Mashiach. It's part and parcel of everything else. But the Rebbe Rashab describes a person who is cold and frigid in his Torah and his mitzvahs, and therefore doesn't, he may follow all the official rules, but he's not really there. And one of the ways that you could see he's not there is that his belief in the coming of Mashiach is weak. This guy was studying Hasidus once with a certain Satmar Chassid. This is years ago, the height of the Satmar battle against secular Zionism and religious Zionism and all kinds of Zionism. And they were learning a discourse about Amalek. And the Hasidic discourse describes various levels of Amalek and different kinds of spiritual maladies. And after they finished studying, so he asks this Satmar Chassid, does he understand who the Rebbe is referring to? He says, of course, he's talking about those Zionists in Israel. How dare they do what they're doing? Obviously, it's not who the Rebbe is referring to. The Rebbe is referring to each of us. Each of us has a level of, an aspect of Amalek in us. And that's what that Maamar was talking about. And this Maamar is not talking about a certain kind of person, someone who doesn't wear a Chabad kapata, doesn't say chitas. We're not talking about a certain class of people. We're talking about an element of this inside of us. We mentioned yesterday a teaching of the Rebbe Rashab in that same talk, between frigidity and denial of God completely. There's a very fine line. That's something that unfortunately exists in everyone. It's a big tent. And perhaps time the Rebbe Rashab, this was something that was a certain class of people, but it's something that we all fight with. But he says that's the war. The war is against those who fight against Hashem, and the war is against those who disgrace, those who are missing emun in the coming Mashiach. And he says, that we concluded yesterday with saying that Moshe Rabbeinu was humbled. Why was he humbled? Because he witnessed, Hashem showed him our generation, and he showed Moshe the kind of challenges that we will have, kind of concealments of godliness that we will have, and yet we'll still persevere and we'll still be devoted to what Hashem wants us to do. And that's what made Moshe Rabbeinu, that's what really impressed Moshe Rabbeinu. Let me just put the charger in 1 second. So what was lacking in the kind of person that Rav was describing is not something that's specific that you could pinpoint and say, oh, he's not learning Torah, he's not doing mitzvahs, but it's something inside of him that he's missing this fire. It says in the Torah, God is fire, and he's missing that fire, and that's very connected to the theme of this Maamar. The Maamar discusses two kinds of war. You're fighting a war because you want to amass treasure. You're fighting a war because the king's will needs to be fulfilled. Think about what Mashiach is about. What's victory look like? We're not trying to amass treasure. We're trying to have the king be victorious. Who is the king? What does this victory mean? The king is Hashem. Who is Hashem? Hashem is truth. So what is the truth of everything? The truth of everything is Hashem. What does redemption mean? Redemption means that the truth of Hashem is revealed in every single thing in the world. That's what we call the redemption, the true and complete redemption. It's true. It's a redemption of the truth of everything. And it's complete. Hashem will be revealed in the world. Tumah, the impurity, will be removed. And there won't be a space or a thing or a time where God's glory is not revealed in. So to get to that time of total victory, of total revelation, of truth, the Geula HaMitis VaShlema, the true and complete redemption, it requires us also to be true and complete. We also have to be true and complete. Truth and completion is what we're discussing yesterday of the students of the yeshiva and Chatmimim, the students of this yeshiva. The Rebbe made this yeshiva so that people should not just be the guys who learn the Torah and do the mitzvahs and they're missing that fire. But they should also have the full. Chomar, is that raising your hand? Okay, we're trying to warm up the coffee over there. Chaim. Let me give you a few just examples of perhaps the distinction between someone who's got it and someone who's missing it. This idea of truth and completion, total devotion, that Rebbe Shab is referring to. Rabbi Mishalov ben Zayin Gesund is a sefer in town. He was in Russia. His son told me the story, and it was night of the Seder, and he realized that he didn't have his becher. His becher was by a relative of his who was a town away. It's the night of the Seder. So he had a kosher cup, but he didn't have his becher. So he walked to the other town and walked back the night of the Seder. You can imagine after all the preparation for the Seder, so he could use the becher. This was a Pesach becher. There are other bechers which could qualify, but this was his Pesach becher. You won't find the code of Jewish law an obligation to have your person Pesach becher. I was once in New York, and it was like a Maamar parade. And the guy organizing the parade, it struck me this event. It was a parade, and his guys are organizing the whole parade, and there's thousands of people there, and there's all different things. There's Ferris wheels, and there's all kinds of rides, and there's one kid running around, and his yarmulke fell off, and he didn't realize. This guy who's organizing the whole thing, he stops. Hey, Boychik, little boy, your yarmulke. The idea of completion and truth means that everything really, really matters. Everything matters. The Rebbe Rashab he had terrible pain in his teeth, terrible pain. And the Rebbe Rashab he could have solved this pain by getting a filling, dentures. He refused. And I think it was Rebbe Rashab's Rebbitzin who asked another Gadol Yisrael to discuss this with Rebbe Rashab. Perhaps she could prevail upon her husband. Fillings are things that everyone does. And Rebbe Rashab told this Gadol Yisrael, I remember in a second who his name was, from Pressburg. Rebbe Rashab said, is there a sale of a svek that there might be an issue of milchiks and fleishiks? Is there a shadow of a doubt that there may be some kind of problem with the dairy and meat mixing together somehow in what was absorbed in the filling? Now, in the code of Jewish law, there are various words that describe issues. I don't think that there is anyone who's concerned with the words a tsail of a sveka, a shadow of a doubt of a doubt. That's something that's invented. It's invented in the sense that it's not something which is a concern. But if the Eibishter is truth and completion, then your physical pain is meaningless, zero, and there's something else which is far more. This is truth. There's a shadow of a doubt, a kernel of truth over here. That everything else is meaningless. The Friedrich Rebbe, when he came to America, Torah Vadas, one of the, it was probably the only yeshiva, I'm not sure, the only yeshiva, maybe one of the few yeshivas in New York at the time. They were having tremendous financial difficulty. The building was going to be foreclosed on. You could see the story on Jem published a story a few years ago. If you message me, I'll post it. And the Friedrich Rebbe knew that they were having financial difficulty, and he sent a shliach. He sent someone to help them. And the shliach comes to the yeshiva Torah Vadas, and he says that the Lubavitcher Rebbe has sent this to assist the yeshiva. But before I give you this money, I have to give you a message. I don't remember the words, something to this effect. In Russia, the Friedrich Rebbe said, we gave our lives that the Torah should be studied. It didn't matter how many children it was. It didn't matter if it was one child, it was 10 children, it was 100 children. We made sure that every child would be given someone to teach them Torah. And here in America, we're allowed to study Torah. No one's stopping us. And yet there is a situation where the Torah is not going to be studied just because of a financial issue. So the Friedrich Rebbe said, I'm going to give funds to make sure the yeshiva does not close and the yeshiva could stay. But to do this, I'm endangering all the work that I have done until now. Someone told me, this is not in the video, someone told me the Friedrich Rebbe actually put a mortgage on 770. I'm not sure if that's true, but he said, but those are the words he used. I'm endangering all of the work I've done until now, but I'm doing this because it can't be basically. This cannot be. The yeshiva cannot close. Now, think about this. It cannot close. It can't be. It doesn't matter if it was his yeshiva or someone else. Of course, these boys are studying Torah. This can't stop. This can't stop. That's the difference between trying to amass treasure. You're fighting a war because there's an objective, a certain thing you want to achieve, versus the victory of Hashem. Where there's a victory of Hashem means that the Geula HaMitzvah Hashem, the true Geula. And therefore, who fights this war, as we learned yesterday in the last week, the one who fights this war are the soldiers of Hashem. Who are soldiers? Soldiers of the house of David. Soldiers of the house of David means that they are totally devoted completely to the victory. Not to my grandfather, Al Shalom, my Fogelman, always shared a story that he heard from the Chassidim before him, which I think was this parable was given by the Rashbats of Shul Batzal, which, by the way, I started sharing the story of the Rashbats on Matzah Shabbos, amazing story. Anyways, Rashbats would share the following parable. He was a teacher of the Marash, the Rashab, and the Friedrich Rebbe, so his parables are worth paying attention to. He said that there was once a man who was very religious, and he was very observant, kept every mitzvah very carefully, and he worked very hard, and he would come home at the end of the day, very tired and very hungry. Despite being so tired and hungry, he would make sure that he'd come to daven Ma'ariv. He would daven Ma'ariv with every single word of the kavanah, every single word. A friend of mine told me how when he was in Russia, how this chassid went to daven Ma'ariv, and Ma'ariv, a regular weekday Ma'ariv, took him 30 minutes. When these guys daven Ma'ariv, it wasn't just like with davening Ma'ariv. It wasn't the 7-minute version. They went to talk to the Eibishter. Anyways, so he daven Ma'ariv the way he's supposed to daven Ma'ariv, the way they daven Ma'ariv in those days. The people really daven Ma'ariv. That's how they did. They daven Ma'ariv. So they went to talk to Hashem, and he's hungry and he's tired. But he didn't just go out and like stuff. He went and he washed his hands very carefully, and he said Til Sadayim, and he benched very carefully every word. And then he said Kriya Shema Amit and the Cheshbon Nefesh you're supposed to make before going to sleep and accounting of the day. He went through the whole thing very carefully and very detailed. And After he finishes everything else, he goes into his bed. And by the way, I just remember, the guy told me a story about him medallion Meyer for 30 minutes. It wasn't someone who was in Russia a long time ago, someone who does this today. So just want to point out, there are people who talk to God every day in America in 2021. Either way, so he goes into his bed after all this stuff, and he pulls his blankets over him, and he says, ah. Rashbat said, this is the ultimate separation from Hashem. This is absolute separation. You know why it's separation? Because whatever he's doing, what's it all about? It's all about, you should get to this, satisfy his conscience. So you should say, I'm done with you, Hashem. So all of his Torah, all of his mitzvahs, there was no connection there really. There wasn't a connection. It was all about, I want to feel good that I did it, that I'm done with it. Okay. So that's the meaning of the Muhammad's Beis David, those who got the war, the fight to the house of David, that they're not there for not there for just to get over with, but they're there for the victory, that the Eibishter's will should be fulfilled, that it matters to them Hashem's desire. They think about the Eibishter. The Friedrich Rebbe said, a chassid is someone who thinks about Hashem. Okay, let's continue. Now we can understand why the Friedrich Rebbe begins this chapter discussing the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu, the generation of Atzilus, generation which felt the absolute truth of Hashem. Why is he talking about that? We're talking about people in this world, in our times, which are not in the level of Atzilus. So why are we talking about the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu, and we're thinking they are called the soldiers of Hashem? How is that relevant to us? And the answer is that through our efforts in this and end of Gullus, we are able to cause the revelation of Atzilus in this world. That's the goal. The goal is that Atzilus should be here. And for that purpose, Hashem gives us all the treasures, all the things which are hidden, which have never been revealed to the world before, which have never been given to any regular people before. The kind of godly energies and the revelations that have never been seen before. Hashem gives us all of that and soups us our neshama with incredible strength because of what's at stake right now. What's at stake is not that just we should reach the level of the prophets where there was some revelation, not just the level of Joshua, but the level of Moshe Rabbeinu's generation. That's what's at stake, and for that purpose, Hashem gives us all the treasures. What this means is next page, we're on page Memches. The Eibishter helps us to fight this war, and he gives away all the treasures that were gathered from one generation to the next. Why does the previous Rebbe say Hashem has generations? What is he referring to? So perhaps the Rebbe says, to corresponding to the two kinds of people that war against Hashem and war against Mashiach, people who correspond to those two kinds of people we discussed, perhaps the Friedrich was alluding to that commensurate to that, Hashem also gives us these two different kinds of godly revelations for us to encounter, for us to fight against these different kinds of klippa. There doesn't specify what those two kinds of treasures are, but certainly there's a difference between the kind of stuff you need to fight the Yevsektia in Russia, to teach Torah underground, and to live in America and to try to overcome the challenges that we have over here and the challenges we have within ourselves, not in our own personal belief in the coming Mashiach and in our fire in Dum Torah Mitzvahs. Different kind of energy that's needed. The Maharal writes, he quotes a medrash. I think the Maharal is the only source for this medrash. There are many medrashim that we don't have there, we're lost, but the Maharal quotes a medrash. The Maharal says there are different kinds of exile. There's one level of exile, the Jews are exiled among non-Jews. and they're persecuted. A worse kind of exile is where they're not persecuted and there's assimilation. A worse kind of exile, he says, the worst exile is where there are those who study Torah for the right reasons, for its own sake, and they are exiled among those who study Torah for the wrong reasons. That's the worst kind of exile. Of course, in our experience, that wouldn't be called the worst exile as long as we have Rocky Road ice cream. But it's called the worst kind of exile because it's the most confusing. It's the most confusing. Here you have the Torah, and you think the Torah is about the fire of Hashem. Someone else is studying Torah, and it's like whatever. It's meaningless to him, and he studies Torah, and that's the most confusing kind of thing. And the Hashem gives a special strength to counter the different kind of challenges that we have. The generation of those who scoff Mashiach, for that purpose, Hashem reveals to us different kinds of treasure. Maybe I'm thinking. The Rebbe spoke about how in order to live with Mashiach, we need to study it, not just Chassidus, we need to study about the coming Mashiach. We need to learn about the coming Mashiach. It has to be in our minds. We need to learn about Mashiach in order to live with Mashiach. So perhaps one of those treasures that's been given to our generation is this focus and emphasis on studying about the coming Mashiach. Anyway, that's just my conjecture. But Hashem gives us two different kinds of godly energies, two different kinds of revelation that were never given before, to counter these two different kinds of generations. And the Jew also has to give away of all of his treasures to win the war. We have to give from ourselves. If Hashem is giving away his treasures, we should also give away ours. Because the attribute of Netzach, of total victory, the desire for victory, for Hashem's victory, is rooted within our souls, in the very core of our souls. You give away all of the treasures that you wouldn't show. Certainly, you wouldn't give away recklessly, whether you gather them yourself. What does a Jew give away? There are your treasures, and there are treasures of your father's. What are those treasures? It says in the Torah, "This is my God, and I will glorify him, the God of my father, and I will exalt him." This is my God. There's something that I have achieved, and I have a personal relationship with Hashem. It's my God. That's my treasure house. It's my relationship. And it's something that's valuable to me because I have achieved something that my connection to Hashem matters to me. Then there is the God of my fathers. There's some kind of things which are beyond me that I receive my Zaydas and Babas and something that also matters to me. And there is the Gan Eden. There is Chaye Nafshe. There's the life of my soul. The life of my soul means there is something that will give my soul life after passing away. There's something that will really, really be enjoyable, that will animate and vivify and give a pleasure to the soul that we cannot imagine. As the Rambam says, that we can't really understand what Gan Eden is about because being a soul in the body, we don't have any parallel to the pleasure of Gan Eden. All he says is that all the pleasures in this world are nothing compared to the pleasure of Gan Eden. So a Jew gives away all of that. He gives away his own treasures. He gives away his connection to Hashem. He gives away his connection to the world to come. He gives that all away to win the war. In other words, not only does he care about the Eibishter's being close to Hashem, he cares about the fire of Hashem, he does mitzvahs and Torah with passion, but he also gives away those same opportunities to be close to Hashem when it comes to what Hashem wants to accomplish. It's very similar to the expression of the Alter Rebbe. Let's read further. He gives away the world to come. He gives away the highest level of Gan Eden. He gives away the life of his soul. Souls come from God's throne of glory. Therefore, God's throne of glory, which is revealed and illuminates heaven, illuminates Gan Eden. That's called the life of the soul. So a Jew gives away the Gan Eden, gives away the life of his soul. So when Gan Eden, That's the meaning of the statement of the Mishnah. Do not be like servants who serve their master for the sake of reward. Reward doesn't just mean to get another bag of goodies in this world. It also refers to Gan Eden. Don't be like servants who serve Hashem because they want to get Gan Eden. It's also called a pras. It's also called a reward. Instead, how do we need to serve Hashem? We need to serve Hashem in the same way that the Alter Rebbe did. Of course, the Alter Rebbe is the Alter Rebbe, but something of this has to trickle into us. What did the Alter Rebbe say? The Alter Rebbe said, I don't want your Gan Eden. I don't want your world to come. All I want is you alone. So just like the king gives his life aside to save, to win the war, so too the Eibusha says to a Jew also, you have to put the life of your soul aside. What does it mean to put the life of your soul aside? This is similar to what we were learning a few months ago about how the Rebbe said in the Maamar in Achron Shapesach Tafshin Yudalid, you're in a room, and you know that outside the room that you're in, where you're studying in Torah and you're enjoying life, there's a child. The child has no Kometz Alafah. And you say to the Eibusha, let me enjoy you, let me be close to you. And the Eibusha says, and the Eibusha is knocking on your door, and he's saying, open up for me. Because outside there's a child who's still in Kometz Alafah. And you say, let me be close to you. And Hashem says, no, go play a game with a child for half an hour, just so he should say Kometz Alafah. So this is what the meaning of giving away your treasures means, that you don't care so much about you do care, but you give away what you care about for the sake of what Hashem wants to accomplish. You know that there's another child you could teach Torah to, and therefore you give away chaye nafshe, you give away the life of your soul, you give away your Gan Eden, because Hashem wants them to accomplish something. Any questions? I see a beautiful child over there. Baruch Hashem. Is that showing off?
No, you're giving away, learning the shir, so I could be with the baby.
Okay, so that's an equivalent today. Basically, is that just like the king gives away his life to win the war, so to the Eibusha asks us to give away what we really care about in order to win the war, in order to get what Hashem wants done. Hashem, tomorrow, God willing, we will conclude this Maamar. Hopefully, we won't conclude it. Hopefully, we'll absorb it and imbibe the Maamar. Hashem. Any questions or comments before we start for today? All right. A great day to Beryl. Great day to Mordechai. Great day to Resman.